Look at you.
Technology.
Welcome to mojonsports.com, The Bio. This is episode 22. We are with Canadian actor Barry Pepper. And man, you talk about a resume. We mentioned it in the introduction. Barry, thanks for doing this. And man, oh man, when I look at this resume and this piece of work, I'm going, wow, it's so impressive. And we'll get to it, but let's get to your beginnings, because I find your story amazing in the sense that, from what I read, your family came to Vancouver Island in the 1800s, a lot of roots there. Your dad apparently was a lumberjack, from what I understand. And, well, you didn't have a conventional childhood, right? I mean, going on a boat, a sailboat, the Moonlighter, from age 5, your family sails down to Mexico. You spend the next 5 years on this boat going across the Pacific, New Zealand, Polynesia, you name it. First off, to me, I'm kind of puzzled, because when I think of a lumberjack, I think of a guy that, does his work, goes down to the pub on Friday night and has a pint or two. But I don't see too many lumberjacks building a boat and then, going on a sailboat for 5 years. Tell me a little bit about that experience in your family.
Wow, you really have done your homework, Moj. Well, my dad, he was raised by, pioneer sort of parents who had settled in the Peace River, really hard scrabble people. I believe he was born in a town nearby called Bear Flats, where his mom, my grandmother, had to ride pregnant horseback through the timber to this town, which was about 5 miles away in September. So up in the Peace River, it would have been through the snow. So they're just a really hard scrabble people. And so his dream was never to be, a lumberjack. His dream was to travel. And he grew up in a household where they had the entire National Geographic collection on the wall. Like, that was I didn't have a television. And so their only, source of reading was, I think they had an encyclopedia and like I say, that entire collection of National Geographic. So I think as a young man, he was reading those books and reading about the world. And that was really kind of what drew him to traveling. And, the only means to that was to build his own sailboat. So as he was falling here on the Pacific Northwest, he was, squirreling his money away and building this sailboat in a barn in our backyard in Kemper River, he and my mother. And in about 1975, he launched it. And then we spent a year or so sailing around the Gulf Islands in the Georgia Strait. And then sort of, I guess, once he and my mother learned celestial navigation, so with a sextant, using the stars and the horizon and the sun and the moon, sort of the way Columbus would have traveled, they set offshore. And so we went down the coast to Canada and Mexico, and then eventually, I think our first stop was Hawaii, and then the Marquesas and Fiji, Tahiti, Tonga, Rarotonga, eventually New Zealand, and around through there, and spent about 5 years total living on the sailboat as a family of 5, and not all in the South Pacific, but living on board the Moonlighter for about 5 years. And then when we came back to Canada, we sailed back through sort of the same route. We built a home on one of the Gulf Islands where my deep ancestry is from in this area. And so that was sort of his origin story.
Yeah, but I mean, like most 5-year-olds, you say, "Hey, we're going to Costco," and they're like, As a 5-year-old, what were the emotions when your parents say, "Hey, we're going to go on this sailboat and we're going to be gone for quite a while"? I mean, can you remember how you felt?
I don't think they pitched it like that. Because my older brother, he was in Scouts and Little League and had all of his friends. I mean, as a 5-year-old, I was, sort of unestablished, and you just sort of go with the flow at that age. But for my older brother, I think it was much more challenging for him, because he had to kind of leave baseball and all his buddies and Scouts and things behind. And so that was a bigger transition for him than it was for for me. But I don't think Dad pitched it that way. We're just like, we're gonna go sailing. The next thing you know, you're in freaking Tahiti.
Did you ever have what are your favorite memories of that journey?
Well, we were, I don't know, I wouldn't say poor, but, definitely middle class. And my dad, being Scotch Irish, he could make copper wire out of a penny. And so we never went to the fancy ports and yacht clubs. And we always sort of, went to the islands, the remote islands, sort of like you would see in that series Survivor. In fact, they actually, a lot of their seasons were in places that we went to. But at that time in the 70s, it was just like, shacks and very poor villages. And so we would just anchor in those harbors, and then we would just live and trade and hunt and fish with the local people there. And so, yeah, there wasn't any really big fancy memories of sailing. It was pretty raw and rugged lifestyle. We would go up into the mountains and hunt for wild goats or pigs or chickens and trade with the locals. They'd have fruit and maybe taro root and breadfruit and mangoes and papayas and things like that. You'd trade for a stalk of bananas, and maybe Dad had something that, he could trade them for that they needed, or he'd do some work for them, fixing up maybe one of their houses were just so simple. They cooked outside on an open fire and just corrugated sort of iron shacks and nothing fancy. But really loving, giving, beautiful people, just so full of, music and love, and some of the happiest people and some of the happiest memories of my life were just there in the islands with the French Polynesian people, because they had nothing, but they were just so happy,
I imagine your love of nature started with that trip. I mean, clearly some of the things that you mentioned, like, hunting, fishing, all of that, being on a sailboat. But also imagine as a 5-year-old growing up, through those years, 5 through 10, you had to become pretty creative to entertain yourself, because there was no PlayStation, I imagine, on that.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I imagine you had to kind of really become creative and learn how to entertain yourself.
Yeah, and then you hit the nail on the head there, Moch, because I sometimes, backtrack to how did I end up in this weird business, But it really was those formative years, because we had no television. We had no, I don't know if we had music, but, you had to be sort of near, obviously, a station to pick up any music. So we didn't really have any entertainment other than just our own imagination. So it was nice to have my 2 older brothers, because we, play cowboys and Indians, and, you run around, you're dealing with a 50-foot sailboat. It's only 14 feet wide. And so it's limited space to play. But, we would draw, we would, spend a lot of time drawing and reading, and imagination games were big, and board games were big. And so, I think that's where those sort of the imagination skills developed, and maybe what led me, to this path that I'm on. But art was really my focus. I wanted to be a graphic designer. And that's why I'd won some scholarships or bursaries in high school that sent me to art school. And that was really what I wanted to do. Because of those years, I just spent hours and hours, years just drawing sketchbooks. And so that was really my passion.
You come back off that trip, and as you mentioned, art is something that's very important to you.
Yeah.
It's funny, we had Dave Van Horn on last week, the longtime play-by-play voice of the Expos and the Marlins, and his career kind of got started by answering an ad in a paper that a friend answered an ad. He went along regarding a DJ at a station. And there's a similar story with you, because you kind of answered an ad in terms of acting, and the next thing you know, you kind of got involved.
Yeah, I ended up, after art school, I went to BCIT, Vancouver. I moved to Vancouver, and I wanted to get sort of a business background so I could freelance as an artist. And I knew nothing about marketing myself. And so I took first year marketing at BCIT, and man, right in my backyard, Johnny Depp is shooting 21 Jump Street, and Richard Dean Anderson's doing MacGyver and The X-Files and all of these shows that you remember. Lonesome Dove and Highlander and all these fun shows that were happening. I just had never seen anything like it coming from the island. Kind of blew my mind. And I thought, man, this would be kind of fun. Like maybe make a little extra cash, be an extra or something. And then I realized that, there was an entry, a way in that I needed to have at least some experience. And so I took some acting classes, and I'd really never, other than everybody, I think, takes drama or some form in high school or middle school, but I had really never taken it seriously. It was just kind of like an elective, but yeah, so then when I started taking, some scene study classes in Vancouver, I was like, man, this is something that I have a little bit of a aptitude for, and I really enjoyed it. And so just the next 5 years, I just kept studying it at all of the different acting studios that were available in Vancouver at the time.
What was the turning point?
Gosh, I'm trying to remember now. I think I landed this teen soap opera called Madison. It was a supporting part, but one of the kids in the high school, sort of like the Vancouver's 90210 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think it was just a great place to cut your teeth, because there wasn't a lot of pressure. I mean, I didn't see it really as a career. I was just enjoying myself yeah, so I spent the next 5 years just doing guest star spots on all the different television shows, and then it started to dawn on me that I was going to wear out my welcome eventually in Vancouver if I didn't maybe move to LA. And so after I maybe had a page of credits, the guest star credits, and then I moved to LA, and I was just fortuitous there. I actually did a pilot with Bryan Cranston called Dogs. It was a men's beer league baseball series. It was a show about this men's beer league team, and that didn't get picked up, and it was with Disney, and so they still had me under contract. And then I got this phone call to meet Steven Spielberg or audition for Saving Private Ryan. And it was funny, he was shooting Amistad at the time, and it was out in Van Nuys in this big warehouse, and he had the entire galleon, the Amistad galleon slave ship, up on gimbals in this like big hydraulic gimbals to recreate the swell of the ocean. And man, I was so nervous. He asked me to come up on deck, and he was shooting some scene with Jaimin Hinsu and Anthony Hopkins or whoever it was at the time. And I was just shaking in my boots, because I literally just packed my car and drove down from Vancouver. This was all pretty new to me, and but had a really great meeting with him on the deck of that ship, and I just listened. I was I think my parents taught me to listen more than I talk, and so I just absorbed what he was really excited. It was so amazing to chat with him, because he was right in the middle of shooting Amistad, and yet he's just already just explosive with his ideas and visions for Saving Private Ryan, and he's sharing like how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that. And I didn't even have the part yet, and I was just so like, okay, this was amazing. This guy's incredible. Like his visionary ideas for this production, so I just was absorbing it all. And then I walked off the deck of Amistad, and I heard hire Barry Pepper, and so obviously we had made a connection, and that was probably like a year into living in LA.
More with actor Barry Pepper after these messages. Barry, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because you said a year. I think your bio on your website says in 3 months, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
most of the times you hear these stories about people going to Los Angeles and wanting to be actors, and they're waitresses or waiters or whatever. I mean, they have these jobs that they take just to make ends meet and pursue that acting career. I mean, for you, if it was 3 months or even a year, man, this happened quick because it takes a long time to break into Hollywood from what, most people tell you, but you did it in a short period of time. Did you kind of have to pinch yourself and go, wow, this is crazy?
Yeah. Sorry, Moj. I meant sort of just my first year there, like first pilot season. And so it was, it was a bit of a mind blower. It's funny. I remember Ryan Reynolds and I were roommates. We drove down to Vancouver, just packed all our gear, drove straight to LA, 24 hours straight, just stopping for fuel and Gatorade. I remember we would, well, no, I won't share that story. But anyway, so we we used the Gatorade bottles. We'll leave it at that. And and I just remember, he had, I think, been there before I had, and so he'd kind of he kind of made it comfortable for me because I had seen so many casualties, like you say, guys and gals going down there and just getting eaten up, coming back just penniless and broken dreams. And I think they went there a little too soon and maybe went there to party. And I'm glad that I had that opportunity to see some of that before I went, just to sort of, because we didn't go there to party. We went there to work.
So you say Ryan Reynolds. So in your bio, it says you and a friend got into your Dodge Dart, which is another story.
Yeah.
We can talk about Dodge Darts all day long. So as you and Ryan Reynolds drive down to California together, that's your friend.
That's right. And he was doing Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place at the time. That was his first series. And so he had scored before I did, before I got there. So he was working. And so it was cool because, he knew a few people and knew a few, we were the same. He was with an agent that he introduced me to. So that was kind of cool. I had kind of a little bit more comfort being there as opposed to just stepping into this massive megalopolis and just being overwhelmed. But yeah, it did happen pretty quick, Moj. I don't know why. No idea.
I mean, here you are in LA within a year or whatever the number of months is. You're on the set of Saving Private Ryan. You're being directed by Steven Spielberg, and you're working with Tom Hanks and Sizemore and all these other great actors. In sports, I always talk about guys taking you under their wing when you're a young guy and helping you. Is there anybody like that? Is it like that in the acting profession, or is it more kind of like sink or swim on your own?
It's entirely sink or swim. But with Saving Private Ryan, Steven hired this amazing Vietnam veteran captain to run that boot camp that he designed with this fellow, Captain Dale Dye. And the idea was to just, kind of immerse us into this brutal 2-week boot camp out in the bush outside of London, the countryside outside of London, and to have us just, live in our World War II, wool fatigues, sleep with our rifles, like in the canvas tents, cook our rations over an open fire, and just was just pissing rain the whole time. And just, anything that you discussed or mentioned outside of that World War II time capsule was a punishment. You'd be in the mud doing push-ups or going for a 5-mile jog, or it was, so his idea was to try to just immerse us and insulate us in that bubble for 2 weeks prior to filming. No scripts, no rehearsal, other than this remarkable concept that he had of keeping us in character. Like I was Jackson the whole time in that, and I wasn't allowed to break character. So we'd be sitting around the campfire in the evening, and Tom Hanks would say, "Jackson, where are you from?" And in Tennessee, and what do you miss most about home? And you just improvise. You just talk about your dog and your mom, and you missed barbecue, or whatever it was that just came to mind. And over the course of those 2 weeks, your character was developed without a script, without any rehearsal. And then we were flown straight to Ireland, where we shot the Normandy invasion sequence. And pissed off and beaten and bloody and just frustrated about the whole process, because we were used to rehearsing with scripts in a boardroom with your latte and this whole thing, but he wanted it to be much more immersive and much more honest. And so when we got there, he said, you guys know these characters now better than anyone, the writers, myself included. So if there's anything in this dialogue, in the script that doesn't work for you, you just say what comes to mind. It was an incredible gift from a director, just amazing to be on this massive Hollywood set with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, and him saying, just improvise if you want to.
Did you realize you're in the midst of something special? Because people talk about Saving Private Ryan as arguably being the best war movie ever made. When you were making it, did you realize, hey, we're doing something really special here?
And not necessarily. It was more just, I think the scale and the scope of what he created was pretty awesome. Like the two towns, Beerville and Ramel, they built them out of nothing in the British countryside, and so these sets were incredible. The bridges and the buildings and all the shops and every storefront every rubbled sort of bomb destroyed storefront you'd walk into, it was an actual functional cafe, like a French cafe with the big espresso machine and the stools and tables and rubble and coffee cups, and everything was authentic. And you'd find a child's doll in the bricks, and it would be actually from 1940s. Everything you'd pick up, you'd find like a postcard in the dirt, and it was actually like a French postcard from the 40s. It was just, the detail was magnificent. So in that respect, you knew you were a part of something very special, in that he cared so much. The detail was so important to him. So that made you feel like you had to.
Yeah, it's amazing. You talk to people in whatever endeavor, and we always hear it in sports. It's attention to detail is one of the keys for people that are successful. It's one of the rules that they kind of abide by. How did Saving Private Ryan and the success of that movie change your life?
Yeah, I mean, it was right after that I did The Green Mile, and that was again with Tom, and so that was kind of nice. We'd been through this extraordinary experience together, and he was like, "Oh, I'm doing this other Depression era, death row prison film," and just invited me onto that one, and so that was I think that was sort of how it changed for me dramatically, was that now I had sort of an entry point into other better productions, than I had the opportunity to have previously.
Or with actor Barry Pepper after this. Barry, you did a couple of sports movies as well. 61, which was directed by Billy Crystal.
Right.
You, Thomas Jane, playing the M&M Boys. You also did Dale Earnhardt. What was it like for you getting into these roles as an athlete, say as Dale Earnhardt or as Roger Maris? I mean, did you watch a lot of sports growing up? I mean, when you got back from obviously your Polynesian tour, but were you a big sports fan growing up? Was it kind of neat for you to play these roles, or was it just more of an actor doing a role?
No, I grew up playing baseball. My eldest brother was a Yankees fan, so I always, looked up to him, and he had, I still have actually his Yankees cap from 40 years ago that he gave me once it was all trashed, and because I admired everything that he did, and he was a really good baseball player. He played AAA ball, and I just always admired Doug's athletic ability, and so for me, I was just sort of following in his footsteps. And so that's how I became a Yankees fan, because Doug was a Yankees fan, and so we played, my dad and Doug and I, we all played on the same men's B League baseball team on Denman Island, and the other islands and the local townships, they all had teams, you know, this sort of men's beer league, B league team, baseball. And so that was really cool growing up, you know, as a teenager, getting to play ball with my brother and my dad. And yeah, and we always, you know, hockey was big. And although we were on an island, so we didn't have a rink, we'd have to, a lot of pond hockey, floor hockey, street hockey, you know, and then when the ponds would freeze over in the winter, we'd play a lot. And so sports was really big because we didn't have television. I don't think we had a television until 85, maybe. We got a small black and white TV. And so, you know, sports was sort of just, yeah, the pastime after school. Everybody was, you know, so I mean, I was really excited to play Roger because I love baseball, but the challenge with that was to bulk up, you know, because I'm kind of, you know, 175, 180, and Roger and Mickey were big guys, you know, they were big corn-fed farm boys from Fargo, North Dakota, and so it was a fair bit of weight training to try to put on a little bit of size, you know.
Yeah, and I got to meet a guy that was associated with that film, Reggie Smith.
Oh yeah,
Major League outfielder. He was in town probably a couple of years ago speaking at a baseball banquet. And
yeah.
Small World he worked with you guys on that movie, right?
Right. Yeah, he was amazing. You know, and he'd spent some years in the Japanese league, and so when we went to his baseball camp, we spent I think a month or so with Reggie. And it was really really cool. What was great having him as our trainer was he was a switch hitter, so he was able to help Thomas. You know, because Thomas had never really had any baseball background at all, so he was having to take Thomas from the absolute, you know, basement to, you know, learning how to throw a ball and swing a bat. But yeah, it was remarkable. Reggie was amazing to work with. Yeah. A great guy.
What was it like doing Earnhardt?
That was tough, you know. It was, you know, it was incredible to drive the cars and, you know, race around the track and whatnot. But it was a challenging film because I think we had, I don't know, our budget was so small. It was like $10 million or something to do NASCAR, you know, to do it properly. It's like, you know, they're just billboards, you know, just everywhere, advertisements everywhere. And it's just so expensive to get those sponsors and to utilize to sort of show it properly. And the tracks are so huge and the cars are so expensive. It was just a really challenging production to do on a tight budget, but I enjoyed it. I got to go to race school at Lowe's Motor Speedway. That was a lot of fun.
Of all the movies that you've done, is there one that you're most proud of? I mean, the obvious would be Saving Private Ryan, but is there perhaps something else that for you is like you look at and you go, I really enjoyed doing this and I really enjoyed the final product?
True Grit would probably be, you know, one of my most memorable productions that I just had such a fantastic time working with Coen brothers and Jeff and Matt and Josh. We had a great time on that show, and I just love westerns. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I think that's one that turned out really great. It's based on the original book. John Wayne's version they kind of adapted it more sort of for John Wayne, whereas the Coens went back to the original book, and so it's quite a different story. I thought they did a great job. They're kind of a bucket list directors for me. I always wanted to work with them.
Well, I mean, you talk about directors: Eastwood, Crystal, Spielberg, Gibson, Spike Lee. You've worked with Hanks, Hackman, Will Smith, Depp, Eddie Norton, the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman. Is there anybody off that list that you kind of look back and you go, wow, it was really neat working with that person?
I wish I had spent a little bit more time with Gene Hackman. You know, it was all so new to me at the time. That was during Enemy of the State with Will Smith, and I was just in awe of him. So I really kind of stayed away. I didn't you know, at that time I was, yeah, just trying to give people their space. And also too, he was a very intense actor. And so I didn't really have, you know, as the time I would have liked to have spent with him, and just, cause that's what, you know, what I felt comfortable enough to spend time with Tom and ask him, you know, advice, you know, cause I was pretty green, and I just wanted to make sure, you know, I was studying the right things, and watching the right historical films, and you know, that I just, you know, that I was focusing on the right things. And I think, you know, one of the big takeaways from guys like that would like, just keep it simple, you know, with Eastwood and with Hanks, and anyone that I did sit down with and try to learn from. Yeah, it was just keep it simple. And but Hackman would have been somebody I would have enjoyed, you know, just sitting and have a coffee with, or, you know.
You know, you talk about keeping it simple. It's a perfect segue into my next question, because, you know, you make it as this actor in Hollywood. You've got all these great roles. I mean, you would think that, hey, here's the house in Beverly Hills, going to the parties all the time, networking, doing this now. But, you know, you come back to Vancouver Island, and, you know, for you, it's right back to your roots, keeping it simple. What draws you back to Vancouver Island?
Well, I was never like a big city guy, you know, so LA, New York, and living in places like that, even Vancouver was never really, you know, I just was never a cut from that cloth, I guess. And so I was always wanting to get back to the island, and it's where all my family still is, you know, brothers, uncles, aunts, you know, that's when Cindy and I got married and we decided to raise a family, we knew that that's where we wanted to raise our kids. And so that's why we ended up back here. We're dual citizens, so we, you know, we go back and forth, and I obviously satellite out from here a lot, but this is where I feel most comfortable and at home. And because I mean, I grew up hunting and fishing and hiking and exploring, and I wanted a garden and an orchard, and I wanted to, you know, I just wanted that life. And so as soon as I sort of established myself well enough to leave LA, I did. But yeah, and also too, I think, Moj, you know, I'm kind of really addictive. I have a really addictive personality, and I just knew it would be my demise if I stayed there. Like, if, you know, my neighbor's into archery, I'm into archery, all in, you know. If somebody's building a hot rod next door, you know, our buddy's building a hot rod, like, well, I got to rebuild a hot rod, you know. If somebody's into motorcycles, I'm all into motorcycles. Like, and it's an occupational hazard, you know. Every character I play, I immerse myself so much into it that I end up bringing all of those hobbies and passions home with me. And so LA is sort of the same. There's so many distractions and so many temptations there that I kind of knew that a simpler life would be better for me. And that's what I have here.
How long do you see yourself acting?
Oh, I've really tapered it off over the last sort of, you know, five or so years, you know, purposefully just kind of dialing it back a bit. And but, you know, I think it's one of those professions that you can carry on. You know, look at Clint, you know. Yeah. Nobody's telling him to wrap it up. But no, I just yeah, you know, I've been smart with my money. I mean, I don't live like an asshole. I pretty simple means. Got an old pickup truck, and you know, we live pretty close to the line. So I mean, I can do it or not do it, and have some fun, and heading to Australia to do an alien thriller here in a little bit. So yeah, every year I probably do one, maybe two films.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people talk to me about, you know, being on air before and not being on air and doing the podcast. And the thing that you kind of miss being on air, and we've all kind of talked about it, all the former show hosts at Ted 40, is the fact you kind of miss that rush sometimes of something big that's happening. Yet at the same time, you still, like, even doing this podcast now, I'm getting a rush and getting that feeling back talking to you. Could you see yourself getting that adrenaline rush you get from acting, whether it would be, say, doing a film, you know, on a Hollywood studio, or even maybe doing a play on some in some Vancouver Island community. Do you think you get the same rush?
Yeah, I mean, I get a rush. You know, Moj, you said it. I mean, I got a rush before we jumped on together. I'm getting a rush doing this right now just because it's kind of fun to just bullshit with an old buddy. And you know, it's funny about our friendship is like we've never actually sat down and had a meal together. You're such a recluse, man. So no, but I mean, we've sort of known each other for quite a while now. But then the pandemic hit, and we had plans to meet for dinner, and that didn't happen. So you know, it's just yeah. But I got a rush, you know, just hooking up with you again and bullshitting about life and work. And so no, it's not something that has left me, that feeling. I could, but I also get a rush from a lot of other things, you know, like I love hunting and fishing and foraging for wild edibles and hiking and you know, I paddleboard and I ride motorcycles. I just got back from Joshua Tree. I just rode my adventure bike down to Joshua Tree from the island and did about 6,000 kilometers in 9 days. And so, you know, I get a rush from a lot of other fun things. So I don't necessarily need it from acting anymore.
You know, it's kind of funny. I'll tell the story about how we actually got to know one another is that I host a big golf tournament that we had at Whistler. Now it's up in Kelowna.
Yeah.
And I get an email one day from this woman says, yes, Barry Pepper would like to play in your golf tournament, right? You know, she was inquiring about
that was Pearl.
Tournament. Yeah, and the crazy thing is I got a buddy of mine named Mike Pepper, who was a program director for a CBS affiliate in Tampa. And I didn't read the Barry part really well, and I'm like, why the hell is Mike Pepper asking this woman about playing in my tournament? Why wouldn't Mike just get a hold of me? So I'm just like trying to understand all this, and all of a sudden it's like, hold on, that's not Mike, that's Barry Pepper that wants to play in the tournament. Well, and you got to get to that tournament one of these days.
Yeah, I was a longtime fan of your show, and I listened to you guys for years, and just loved you and Donnie. And yeah, it was whenever, you know, I was working or, you know, in my truck, I would always have you guys on. And then I heard about your tournament. And I thought, you know, this would be a great way for me to give back. Like I was searching for, I always have been involved in children's charities. And I thought what you were doing was really cool. And I thought, yeah, I'd love to participate. And it sounded like you had a lot of really interesting guests that came, and it sounded like a good thing. And I'd gone to Fargo, North Dakota, to the Roger Maris golf tournament for many years to support that hospice charity that Mickey and Roger started before they passed away. And so, you know, golf, I always enjoyed, you know, golfing. I'm not great at it, but I thought, oh, this would be fun. I get an opportunity to meet Moj and give back a bit. But yeah, we still haven't connected on that.
Hey, this year you're there. I don't care. Clear your schedule. Like, just take time off July. Tell Spielberg no. Yeah. Tell Hanks no. Whoever calls, no, man, I got a commitment.
Well, I'm in Australia around I think till mid-July. But what time are you?
18th and 19th.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can make it happen.
We'll see. Well, private jet, Australia, right into Kelowna. It's all good.
Right on.
Hey, Barry, this has been awesome. It's so neat to hear your story, and an amazing story that it is. And thank you so much for stopping by and being part of this episode.
My pleasure, Moj. Thank you so much. Always great to connect with you.